The biggest relief that I have from this past Sunday's game in Cincinnati is the fact that I don't have to go to Ohio anymore for at least for the rest of the season. So that's my happy note to start the show. Welcome to the Southside Beat, everybody. My name is Chris Halicke. Joining me is Matt Williamson, and joining us eventually after we take our first commercial break, Greg Macafee will be joining us then too. In the meantime, Matt, what's going on?
Hey man, how are you? No more Ohio trips, huh?
No more Ohio trips. The Browns are most likely not going to be in the playoffs, and I think the Steelers can take care of that on Sunday. But the Bengals most likely not going to be there either. So, I think the Ohio trips are done. So I'm excited about that. Still got to go to Philly and Baltimore, so not so excited about that.
Could be worse, though.
Yeah, it could be worse.
At least they're drivers, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So last Sunday, Steelers 44, Bengals 38. Big time win. I understand the Bengals were 4-7 going into the game, but I think anybody who's watched this team and this division long enough knew that was not just, okay, well, the Steelers should be winning this game because the Bengals are 4-7. It's Joe Burrow. It's Jamar Chase. That was a big win for me, and it was a big win mainly because of what the offense was able to do, that they were able to continue to answer touchdown with touchdown, and eventually, once the defense got enough stops, able to take the lead. It was with a couple of field goals, but still able to take the lead and then never give it back. I thought this was a really big win for the Steelers. What say you?
100% agree. And, first off, you mentioned traveling to Ohio. I think it's great that you get to basically bury the Bengals in their own building. I mean, there's a psychological factor there. And maybe you make your Week 18 game a heck of a lot easier as well, because what do the Bengals have to play for? And, hey, I want to keep Joe Burrow out of the AFC playoffs. There's enough badass quarterbacks in the AFC right now that you're going to have to deal with, the Mahomes and Allens and Lamars and those guys that keep the great quarterbacks out. So that's wonderful. I also think the Bengals going forward are in kind of a bad spot. Both Ohio teams, I think, have some gloomy days ahead. The biggest takeaway is kind of like what you said, is there's no way that any of the Steeler teams the last 5 years win this game, give or take. I mean, since Ben's elbow surgery, they do not win this game. And frankly, if you throw a pick six on the first series, you're like, oh, game's over. That's a wrap.
It was kind of like the snap that went over Ben's head in the playoff game against the Browns. Yep. It's kind of like that was just an omen and being like, oh, well, this game's pretty much over. Yep. Even though that was the first play of the game.
Yeah.
I agree that this was a game in which if this team has any chance of competing, and I still don't think the Steelers are on the same level as the Bills or the Chiefs even, not saying that they can't win a game. I think that they could. I mean, it's, the whole any given Sunday mantra.
Chiefs have some issues, but I don't disagree with you.
The Chiefs do. My biggest concern with the Chiefs, and we can obviously get into that in a couple of weeks when they play, is I just fear Patrick Mahomes is going to eat up vanilla cover 3 all day. That's my biggest concern. But but just overall as a whole, I don't think the Steelers are quite on that level just yet. I think they are the top team in that second tier right now. I think you can make a really good argument for the Steelers to be in that top tier. Like the top tier of the AFC right now is Bills, Chiefs, and then you have that second tier of teams. And I really feel like it's the Steelers are right near the top. But the most encouraging thing is that it was the game against Indianapolis. Justin Fields was at quarterback, but they fought back in that game and they nearly won after falling down 17-0. Okay, that's not something we've really seen much of either. Like usually they fall down 17-0, it's over. There's no way that they can come back. Now this game, they have to literally match Joe Burrow blow for blow, and they do it. That you need that in the AFC. You need to be able to fight fire with fire. And I would really like to see the Steelers have a legitimate wide receiver too at this point to kind of make me feel a little bit better about it. But the fact that Russell Wilson is doing what he's doing now, granted, I think we could just put the disclaimer out there now. The Bengals defense is terrible.
Oh, man,
it's so bad.
That version of it in particular is as bad as you're going to see in the NFL with injuries and really, really bad. But that's what you're supposed to do to terrible defense.
Exactly. That's what teams are supposed to do against bad defenses. And I think they put up the most points in most yards against that defense than anybody else has this season.
I think so.
So that's still something, to take away from that too, is that this wasn't, they put up more points than the Ravens did. The Ravens had the number one offense in the league. So I still think it's a very encouraging performance in terms of, okay, when they have to play the Chiefs, can they possibly, if they get into shootout mode, do they have a chance? And I think right now it's more of a puncher's chance, but I think they have one.
I do too. And maybe even Buffalo,
Yeah, just Buffalo, to me, Buffalo scares me, and we can obviously get into that.
I think Buffalo's clearly number one. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just
Buffalo, Detroit, and Philly to me are tier one in the league.
Yes. They're just, I don't see it like those three teams. I don't see a legitimate weakness on their rosters, and their quarterbacks are playing at legitimate levels. And Josh Allen might be the biggest, I've been saying all year long that Lamar Jackson was going to be my vote for MVP. It's kind of swayed to Josh Allen now.
Me too. But how great is it we're having this conversation about how you stack up with the tier one teams as opposed to, well, if these three teams lose and the Steelers can eke out a win, maybe they could be the 7 seed. I mean, that's what the conversation the last couple of years.
Yeah, and even when you go back to the last really good year, or at least regular season the Steelers had, which was in 2020, and they started out 11-0. I think everybody was talking about that it was the most fraudulent 11-0 team ever. That there were a lot of flaws that were being buried by the record. I don't see this now. It's not a perfect team at all.
No, a wide receiver 2 would go a long way.
Yes.
And there are some warts, of course.
Yeah, and you would like the defense to tighten some things up. Now, granted, the defense is right up there in terms of takeaways, so they do at least do that. I just like to see them maybe tighten some things up a little bit in terms of giving up yards, especially in the red zone.
Success rate,
Right, and especially looking at this past week, I think that the big thing to me, and I even had a question on our site on DKPittsburghSports.com earlier this week, is okay, they did this against Joe Burrow. Was there anything that this team needs to do if and when they have to play, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, like those teams? It's force those guys to settle for more field goals. They didn't make Cincinnati do that. Cincinnati was able to move down the field and score touchdowns. They had to kick one field goal all game, and the rest of the time they scored touchdowns. I mean, you got to make teams settle for more field goals. And I put it this way. I was like, if a team gets 8 drives in a game, which that's a pretty, fair number, and you make them kick a field goal literally every time. Now they get points every time, but you also keep them out of the end zone. It's only 24 points. Yeah, and if you hold Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes to 24 points, I think you're doing okay.
Yeah, you'll take that in a playoff game all day long.
Yeah. So we're gonna take a break real quick, and I actually just got a text from Greg that he hit some crazy traffic, so I think we're going to be riding this out the rest of the way. So
we can hold down the fort.
Yeah, but when we come back, we're going to look at this upcoming matchup with the Browns. Much bigger matchup than you might think. Just because the Browns are 3-9 doesn't mean that this game doesn't carry a lot of weight. So we're going to get into that right after this.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
Sunday, 1 p.m., Acrisure Stadium, Steelers versus Browns. They are going at it again. I got to be honest with you. I do think, and we'll get into predictions at the very end, obviously, I do think the Steelers will end up winning this. But I'm still a little concerned. There's a small part of me that's a little concerned about this game. I don't know if it's just because the Browns are as motivated to a season success for them is winning at least 2 games, and those 2 games are against the Steelers. And so they're as motivated to play this game. Not saying the Steelers aren't, but having already seen these 2 teams play very recently, seeing the way Cleveland played, seeing the way the Steelers played, I'm concerned about it. Matt, what are you feeling going into this game so far?
Yeah, I was guilty of this. I think all Steeler Nation was guilty of this going into the Thursday nighter. That I forget here's how I've been phrasing it. That the 2024 Browns stink, but the Jameis Winston led Browns are an average football team. I mean, they're not a terrible bottom feeder Jags, Giants type team at all. And I think all of us kind of looked at it like, oh, they lost to one of the worst teams in the league. No, they didn't. I mean, they lost to one of the worst franchises in the league, but that's not, one of the worst seasons in the league. So I wasn't as broken up on a short week in a place you've struggled against the way that game went as a lot of other people were. I'm like, I probably should have seen this coming more than that. Now, they played one of their worst games of the year, if not their worst game of the year. And I was shocked that the Steelers' defensive front didn't dominate or at least win more often. To me, that was the most disheartening thing. But I can't believe that that's going to happen again. Like anyone who watched Hard Knocks saw Tomlin picking at Herbig all week about Orlando Brown.
Yeah.
You think I bet he's been doing that for 17 days in a row since the Browns. Hey, Cam, how'd you play against the Browns? Hey, TJ, you pretty happy with how you played against the Browns?
Yeah.
And now Highsmith's back. I mean, I bet that D line goes insane.
That you make a good point. And I'm glad, and just a quick little sidebar, I'm really glad that Hard Knocks is giving fans an opportunity to see Mike Tomlin work, because most fans only see him work when he's on the sideline wearing a headset on Sundays.
Yes.
And then what he does during practices in Latrobe. And I think we can all say, because I know you've observed practice, and obviously I watch practice on a regular basis, that what Mike Tomlin does on the fields in Latrobe is not what he does on the South Side. It's a little bit different. And even then, we only see what actually happens during practice. We don't see what happens in the meeting rooms. So
right.
I really do.
Or coaches only, or him and Cam having a conversation, it's the two of them. Or I've been saying that all since Hard Knocks started. Like, all of you listening have every right to be like, man, this guy doesn't manage his timeouts well. Why is his clock management so bad? Oh, he loses a game every year he shouldn't. Okay. Even from where you sit, that is very, very fair. But it's not that I'm in the inner circle, but I'm in, at least you and I are in circles closer than Joe Average fan waving a terrible towel. And we're very fortunate to do so. Seeing what we saw in Hard Knocks shouldn't surprise. That's why he wins so many games, folks.
Yep. Yeah. And not to make this a whole Mike Tomlin, argument thing. Right. The man does not come without criticism. Not winning a playoff game since the 2016 season is the biggest one. You can't go that long when the goal is to win a Super Bowl every year, and you can't even win a playoff game in that stretch. And I think those
are facts. Those are undeniable, right?
And there are some variables in there that you could make. Okay, well, Ben Roethlisberger was getting near the end of his career, and then you had to replace him. And there's nothing that makes a team more turbulent than not having a quarterback. And I think that's one of the reasons why Russell Wilson's emergence as the quarterback that he's been in this offense is one of the reasons why the Steelers are a contender all of a sudden, is because the rest of the roster's there. It's just they needed a quarterback. So
let me interrupt you. I'm not sure if I've ever told you this, but something I'm real proud of myself for coming up with. But I think it's really borne out in Tomlin's career. If you give him a top 10 quarterback, the Steelers are a contender. I mean, a contender that might win the Super Bowl. If you give him a bottom 10 quarterback, they go 500 or slightly better and somehow get in the playoffs. I don't know what a middle quarterback looks like here, but I bet it's better than a bottom 10 quarterback. And is Wilson a top 10 quarterback? He's at least a middle one.
I mean, when you're looking at numbers, and granted it's a 6-game sample size, but the numbers are pretty darn good when it comes to what
and the eyeball test is too.
Yes. So I mean, when all is said and done, by the time the season's over, and if he plays, what would be 11 games, if he continues to do this kind of stuff and the offense continues to produce the number of points that they're producing, and that kind of goes into this Sunday, because they got 5 games left. They've they have to win this game. I think there's
I'm glad you said that.
There's more pressure on the Steelers to win this game than there is for the Browns, because the Browns literally have nothing to lose. It would shock me, unless it's like 4th and 17 on their own 20-yard line, that if it's a 4th and 3 or 4th and 4 and it's anywhere near midfield, the Browns are going for it. They have nothing to lose.
They might fake a punt. They might bring an 8-man pressure. You know, I mean, who cares? You know,
they are going to throw everything that they can at the Steelers, while the Steelers have to play with a, controlled sense of urgency, because what's up next after that is at Philadelphia. And as we've stated on here multiple times, they have not won in Philly since 1965. Yeah. It's just not a place that this team has ever played well.
And the Eagles are really good.
And the Eagles are also one of the best teams in the league. It's not like they've got some sort of mediocre team over there. And then it's 6 days later at Baltimore. Then 4 days after that, it's home against the Chiefs on Christmas. And then you close out the season at home against Cincinnati. But that 3-game stretch right there, it would not surprise me at all, even to this point, that the Steelers go 0-3 in that span.
Mm-hmm.
And you just add that to the record right now, that would put them at 9-6. That makes these next two, or this game, and then obviously the one against Cincinnati, really important for how they finish. Are they going to finish the season 9-8? Are they going to finish at 10-7, 11-6? Because you got to talk about, you're talking about the difference between winning a division, making the playoffs, and then sneaking into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because that could still be the possibility
into the playoffs.
Right. And that's the one thing you definitely don't want to do, is you don't want to limp into the playoffs. And so if the Steelers win, just to put it like this, and then we can kind of get into the actual matchup of things that we're looking for. If the Steelers win, they are 2 games up on Baltimore, meaning that they can go to Philly the next week, lose. The Ravens play the Giants that week. They'll likely win. And then at that point, you're still up at a game going into that game in Baltimore. Then at that point, you ultimately control what happens, because if you go into Baltimore and win that game, division's yours automatically. So you're talking about beating Cleveland, losing in Philly, and then going to Baltimore and winning. That's it. Division's wrapped up before you even play the Chiefs, before you even close out the season against the Bengals.
Mm-hmm.
Lose this Sunday.
Yeah.
Likely going to be going into that Baltimore game with the same record as Baltimore. And they'll be coming off of a win, likely over the Giants, while the Steelers will be coming off 2 straight losses, 1 bad one to the Browns, and then 1 in Philly. This is a massive, massive game for the Steelers in terms of the trajectory of their season.
Setting the whole tone for the rest of the year, without question. I mean, it's a playoff-like run you're about to embark on here. Even just the math of it, you've take the KC and Philly game out of it. You have 3 division games left. The goal is to win the division. I don't know if they can get to the 1 seed and all that wonderful stuff, but if you win 2 of these division games, you're probably in as the division champ. If one of them is against the Ravens, you're almost definitely division champ.
Yeah, especially. Yeah.
If it's the 2 Ohio teams, it's probably a coin flip,
Yeah, the Christmas Day will be a big thing, because the Ravens play the Texans on Christmas. So that'll be a big matchup for them. Yeah. Because I think their other 2 matchups are like I said, the Giants, and then they play the Browns the last week of the season. Mm-hmm. So
at a minimum, you need 2 of these 3 division games.
Yes.
And you don't want to be 0-1 then on Monday in those games,
Absolutely. So to get into the actual matchup, the one thing that you brought up, and it's a good point, because it's probably the most important point here, and one of the reasons why I think anybody should be at least a tiny bit concerned about this game, is that the Browns are not the same team. They're averaging 6 points more per game with Jameis Winston at quarterback than they were with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
So,
pretty good offense.
Right.
Pretty good passing game. The running game.
Yes, absolutely. No, shoot, man. Like their passing offense in general, like overall, like you take their numbers for the entire season, it's in the upper half of the league. And that's mainly because of what Jameis Winston has done. And so knowing what we've learned, especially like this year, since they played recently and in a snowstorm, mind you, what do they have to do to slow down Jameis Winston? I have my theory, but what do you see on that?
Well, fortunately, he slows himself down at times too. You know, I mean, there's so much positive, but inevitably, even like that Ravens game that they won, he probably had 2 or 3 near interceptions that should have happened. So you absolutely have to take advantage of the mistakes. And some of it, I don't even blame him all that much for, because they're throwing the ball way too much because they can't run the ball. You know, I mean, so yes, you're also throwing some fuel on the fire for his aggressiveness because you have no running game whatsoever. That's the state of the Browns right now. You know, I mean, so be it. But I keep coming back to just a massive advantage that didn't show up on Thursday night. It's just in the trenches, the Steelers' defensive front. I mean, they're so healthy now. Herbig's unbelievable, and he's your number 3. Preston Smith is your 4. I mean, he's a starter for most teams, and I do think we may even see some 3 edge guys on the field at once. I'm almost pretty certain that we will, and we'll see what that looks like. But great, get your best 11 out there, you know, and don't let him beat you over the top. You know, tackle the catch. I don't think you have to get crazy on the back 7. I think this is just a D-line, go win this thing for us type of game. And that doesn't mean I expect them to shut him out by any means. I mean, I think that this team will score points, not to the Bengals degree, but I think that they move the ball through the air and score points on everybody. I mean, to 80% of what the Bengals are, you know, I mean, along those lines. But it also, a big thing from the first meeting was the Steelers had 1 tackle for loss. The Browns had 11. So I expect a lot of splash on from the Steelers D, whether that's tip passes, turnovers, certainly pressures and sacks, even just throwaways, that type of thing. But let's limit the negatives now on when the offense has the ball. And I know it's only 1 game, but man, it sure seems like Russell Wilson now has no governor whatsoever in terms of changing things at the line of scrimmage and getting out of bad plays. I've said getting out of bad plays 8,000 times this week, you know, and just don't run into the teeth of the defense, you know, don't set them up for TFLs.
Right. And to go back to the Jameis Winston thing real quick, my theory, because you talk about the defensive line needing to have a big day, and they do. But I feel like you have to attack Jameis Winston, but without blitzing him.
Right.
Because he has a 127 passer rating against the blitz this year.
I didn't know that, but it adds up.
Yeah. I mean, you bring pressure, it's not going to work, because what he can do is he can evade that pressure. He can get outside the pocket, and then he can hit the big plays downfield. And even then,
much more mobile than he was when he came in the league.
Very.
He's thinned down. He's worked on his feet. You know,
he's slippery. It's almost like a poor man's Joe Burrow in terms of the way that he can keep his eyes downfield and move around. It's not the quarterback mobility we talk about when we're talking about Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels or any of those guys, but it's the ability to evade pressure, move around in the pocket, slide around, shift a little bit, while keeping eyes downfield. And Joe Burrow shows, I mean, he's the best in the business at it, probably. And he shows you how dangerous quarterbacks can be when they can do that.
And he's a very talented throw on the move player.
Yes. The thing that you've got to make Jameis Winston do is just be a drop back passer and beat you that way. Now, he's going to hit some plays every now and then.
Yep.
But he's also going to make some mistakes. He will throw balls that will be that should be intercepted. That's just
history shows.
The whole gunslinger mentality is there. I mean, and it even showed last week in Denver. Like, he's trying to win the game. He's going to try to make a big play. And he made a couple of really, really bad mistakes and threw 2 terrible interceptions. It's just going to happen. He will make mistakes. And in the meantime, don't let them score touchdowns. Make them settle for field goals. Don't let them get in the end zone.
And their kicker's not great.
Yes, that's the other part of it too. Offensively, the Browns have a better defense than Cincinnati does. And the main reason why, to me, is not even just Myles Garrett. It is actually probably more their cornerbacks. They are able to go out of cover one more often than they do anything else, because they know their corners. All right, go cover the guys. Go play man-to-man, and they can do it.
3 good ones.
Yes, 3 good ones. Delpit's a really good safety.
Yeah.
Their
secondary's legit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you're going to see Russell Wilson throw for 414 yards this week. But the second level of that defense is banged up. They don't have JOK. That defensive front is there's got to be ways that they can attack the middle of that defense without feeling like they have to stretch them, whether it's quick hitters, whether it's, a lot of in-breaking routes or whatever it is. They've got to figure out a way to do it. And let's just be honest here. They got to run the football, and they didn't do that well enough last time.
And to be honest, maybe the one aspect of this team that worries me most, besides number 2 receiver, need more consistency running the football.
Yes.
I mean, what are they at 4.0 yards per carry?
Yeah.
I need that to be at 4.3, and over the course of the game that matters, like even last year, mostly post Canada, boom, they were running the ball well, 150 yards a game, that kind and now it's here and there, but it's not consistent,
Yeah, they do need to kind of hit that. And it was usually around this time of year, end of November, beginning of December, when they started to and that's really kind of been the past couple of years. Even under Canada in 22, they ended that season on a pretty good stretch there where they were running the football really well. It's one of the reasons why they started out 2-6 and ended up 9-8 that year was they were able to run the ball. They do have to run the ball more consistently. I think the offensive line needs to be more consistent in that area, and Cleveland will not make it easy. They've got a good front.
Tomlinson's a good player.
Yeah, Tomlinson and Shelby Harris and Myles Garrett and those guys, they got a good defensive front. So they do need to run the ball more efficiently and more consistently. They don't need to be going 1 yard here, 2 yards there, no yards here, -1, 1 yard, and then all of a sudden break out a 30-yarder. Because then all of a sudden it looks fine, but it really is. Right. You got to get 5 yards here, 3 yards there, 6 yards there. You got to make
create holes,
right. Make to put it in the hole the way the players do. Stay on schedule. Turn 1st and 10 into 2nd and 6 more often than 2nd and 9.
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing. So
11 tackles for loss is not going to cut it.
Yeah, and so many people want to blame running backs and stuff. No, the offensive line just wasn't good enough against Cleveland.
No, in that game, I agree.
They were pretty bad. It was a pretty bad performance across the board. So
we're losing in both trenches. I did not have on my bingo card going into that game. Right.
No. All right. Let's get to the prediction. I do think we didn't really need to get much into the actual breakdown of the game.
We've seen this pretty recently.
I think the only difference is the forecast isn't calling for a snowstorm or lake effect snow. Yeah, it's supposed to be like upper 40s or almost 50 degrees and sunny. It's actually felt like winter time here, and now all of a sudden it's going to feel like kind of late fall a little bit. All right. Matt, what do you got for this game?
I have the Steelers winning 27-17. Now, one thing we haven't mentioned, if Pickens for some reason can't play, all of a sudden he popped up with a hamstring injury.
Yeah.
That would really, really, I'm not going to pick 27 then. I mean, he just has such a ripple effect of keeping people off the line of scrimmage, lighter boxes, safety's not rolled his direction. If he doesn't play, I think this thing turns into a slog, and a battle that, Tomlin's happy, run, punt, eat clock, hope to win this thing in the fourth quarter type. I think he's that important. But I'm going to operate under the assumption he plays. I got 27-17, and I really think the story on Monday is going to be, that's the D-line we remember. That's the pass rush we remember. That's the playmaking defense that they are capable of.
I do have the Steelers winning this game. I like I said, I don't feel great about it. I went against my better judgment the last time, and like I said, I should have just gone with my initial pick of that short week right after playing the Ravens that they just weren't going to win. This time, the biggest concern for me is that the Browns are going to be going all out for this, and George Pickens saying stuff like Greg, I don't know who Greg Newsom is, like saying
I didn't hear that.
Saying stuff like that in the media, like they are looking for anything and everything to try to. This is again, it's going to be another Super Bowl for them.
It's Michigan ruining Ohio State's year. You know, you know what I mean?
If the Browns aren't going to be a playoff team, which they're not, then they would be just as content going 2-15. But as long as those 2 wins were against the Steelers.
Yep.
I do
and
have
you're going to get the best from Garrett and, right.
I do have to go with history on this one too. Mike Tomlin and just in general, Mike Tomlin has never lost to the Browns twice in the same season.
Well, they haven't swept the Steelers since 1988.
Right.
It's the longest streak in history.
Yeah. And
they have a 20-game regular season losing streak going in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
that's some crazy stuff.
So that's the other thing too, is that he's also never lost at home to the Browns. Mike Tomlin, I mean, shoot, I have to actually go back and actually go through it. I'm sure it's happened semi-recently, but it doesn't feel like Mike Tomlin gets swept very often in this division.
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, he's got a very much a winning record in the division, especially lately. Yeah. And
so that to me is kind of the thing that puts it over the top, that this team's going to be ready to go. The Browns are going to be as motivated as ever, but I still think that this is probably a game that the Steelers win. It probably will be closer than some people want. I'm going to say 24-20. The Steelers kind of eke one out. It's not going to be the prettiest. The Browns will put up some points because I think Jameis Winston and Jerry Jeudy and those guys can hit on a few things. I'm not fond of where the defense is right now in terms of limiting big plays. I think they need to tighten some things up again. And until I see it, I'm going to kind of go with that. The teams that can exploit that are going to do it. So I'm going to go 24-20 Steelers win, improve to 10-3, have that 2-game lead. That's my prediction. All right. We are going to go ahead and hop off. We'll be back next week. We'll obviously break this down for a few minutes, and then we'll get into next week that matchup in Philadelphia that I don't feel great about, and I don't think I'm going to feel better about it in a week anyway either. So
after they destroy Carolina, probably not. Yeah.
All righty. Thank you everybody for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We'll be back next week. Until then, we'll catch you on the Flippity Flip.